Welcome back to Chat Shit. This is the most exciting week in the entire AFL season. Most exciting week for us Swans fans. We absolutely can't wait for the grand final in just under a week's time now. And just to avoid questions, my co-host has a black eye. Do you want to tell us about it?
Look, I appreciate any concerns you guys might have, but there is an ongoing investigation. I can't talk very much about it. Might have been a scuffle with some Port fans, but it's all just alleged rumours.
Right, well then we'll dive right into the Swans versus Port game. Now, it's a bit of an underwhelming prelim final for the neutral fan.
Not for us.
Not
though.
for us. We
exactly
absolutely
what
loved
we
it.
wanted.
We're on top pretty much the entire game. Can't complain. It's the fifth grand final now under John Longmire in his 14th season.
The Swans have just built perfectly, haven't they? We were worried that they were leaving it too late, looking at about round 20, but now having some perspective, this is the exact way that we wanted to come in. In finals, we've had a big win, and we've had a really close, tight win, which has shown that we can get it done in those really tight finals games. I think the Swans will feel as confident as they possibly could.
Well, 100%. The what was coming into the game was Port had won the last 8. They'd beaten the Swans by 112 just 48 days earlier. And it didn't seem like the Swans cared at all. I mean, they got off to a hot start, which we hadn't seen. When Swans have won the first quarter of the season, they won the game.
Yep.
They were up by 2 goals. Papley kicked a goal at the end of the first quarter. Got the boys going.
Something else we haven't seen is the Swans' key forwards have a big impact. We haven't seen that for a while. So hot starts we haven't seen, and the key forwards having a big impact. We saw Amadi, McLean, and Logan McDonald all have a big piece to say in that game. What did we say in the pre-game? We said we'd love to get 5 goals out of them. Bring it to ground and get 5 goals between you. I think they ended up with 7 or 8 between them.
I think it was actually 6. I think Amadi got 3. Logan.
Amadi got 4 in the end. They got 7 between them.
7 between them. Okay.
Which made us very, very happy, and especially in the crucial part at the start of the game where we needed to get a hot start. That was great to see, and I wonder if they can stand up against Brisbane.
Well, that's gonna be a big talking point, and we'll jump into that in a video coming up soon where we're gonna preview the grand final.
Yeah.
But then I just want to give a shout out to Ollie.
Oh wow!
In that game, hugely impactful. Port Adelaide looked like he was gonna get best on ground in a side that was dominated.
Yeah.
The Swans reacted by throwing Luke Parker to him, who I guess he didn't allow Ollie to influence the game as much. He gave him a man to pick up. He took him a lot deeper. But still, Ollie took 7 intercept marks and was probably Port's best player on the ground by an absolute mile.
Yeah, you know how much I love Luke Parker. I don't know if he did quell the influence of Ollie. He just sort of kept going.
I think it's because he took him away from the contest. He didn't allow him to just sit at the back of every contest.
Yeah, just be the third man up.
Exactly. So when he did still have a huge influence on the game, I think it could have been a greater influence on the game.
Yeah. A couple of things that I wanted to highlight. Heeney and Warner, their scoring power, which has been talked about so much, it's such a weapon, and it's just such a tangible thing that other teams simply don't have. It is such a luxury to have 2 midfielders that have now kicked 70 goals between them for the season. That's something that is not really heard of.
Yeah.
It's really special something that we're witnessing as a neutral fan or as a Swans fan. And we saw it again. They each kicked 2 goals and were incredibly influential in key moments. I want to say Heeney is, just to make it clear, he is far and away the best player in the competition now. He's pretty much unbeatable in the air. It is now, if Heeney has time to get forward when we're sending it inside 50, it is isolate Heeney, everyone else get out of the way and let him go 1-on-1. And if it goes 2-on-1, then send it to the contest where we'll have the extra man. It is all centered around Isaac Heeney. And then he's, of course, just dominating across the ground as well in the contest, in the stoppage. And he'll rightfully go in as the Norm Smith favourite.
100%. And it just sort of seemed like after half-time, they were told, find Heeney if he's in a 1-on-1. They were targeting him even when he was in a 2 or 3-on-1. Whereas in the first half, they weren't looking for him when he was in that sort of space, and we know what we can do when he's got a bit of space. But I think the main difference was Port were up 26-9 at clearance at half-time, and it finished 34-28.
Yeah.
So the Swans won the second half 19-8 clearances. And I think that was huge for us to get on top of the games and stop losing the ball up the middle, having to rebound. And we know the Swans don't mind rebounding. That's sort of our game, building up
transition,
back. Except against a very strong clearance team in Brisbane, we're probably not going to want to see those numbers. A much better scoring power team as well.
You know what stuck out the most to me about that 26 clearances to 9 stats? That was the half-time clearance numbers. Port leading 26-9. The Swans were up 20 at that point. I think that perfectly represents the two teams, where you had Port have firepower and depth at the stoppage. They have the capability to just dominate any team at the clearance, but they were so inferior everywhere else. The Swans' transition, ball movement, and polish, as Ken Hinkley put it post-game, it was miles above Port's. And Port put in a valiant effort in terms of pressure and effort, but sometimes the quality of the Swans was just too much to overcome. It was very, very obvious that Dan Houston and Kane Farrell were missing. Their key ball movers out of the back half. They couldn't do anything. Moving out of the back half, couldn't get anything going. And then when they sent it forward from the centre, their key forwards just did absolutely nothing. Charlie Dixon was nowhere. Mitch Georgiades kicked a couple.
And Radigali was nowhere as well. I think
exactly.
He had 3 touches, 1
completely
mark,
nowhere.
and no scoring power at all. But I think what we saw out of the game, I think Port played their grand final last week. Yeah. I think that was where they put all their effort. It was a highly emotional game. I think from what I understand, Port had to reach the prelim final for Ken Hinkley to coach again.
Yep.
So he's obviously going to coach. He's going to coach another year. And I think that was just it. That almost took everything out of them. And the Swans started hot. They just almost felt defeated.
Yeah. Something I find so interesting is the position that Port are in as a club is so fascinating that there are so many fan bases dying to make finals or win a final. Port go and do that every year. They go make prelim finals and get to the real pointy end. But yet there's this sense of really severe dissatisfaction and a sense of failure within their fan base because it's about progress. If you're making the prelims pretty much every year, you want to go a step further. You want to see a rebuild to eventually go further.
Well, yeah, there's no grand final. There's 4 prelims in 12 years. So at some point you'd want to make that step further. But is this group just lacking a little bit of talent? I mean, they've got that powerful midfield.
I'm not the biggest fan of Ken Hinkley. We know this, and there's a lot of people who aren't the biggest fan of Ken Hinkley. I don't think he's the issue when it comes to this. I think he does a good job with this list. You look at their forward line, you look at their back line, I think they're below average in the competition, both of those lines. Forward line especially. You had Willie Rioli who can be creative and do some things, but everyone else is pretty much a B or C grader in that forward line, if we're being honest. And they have to look honestly at their list if they want to progress. They didn't have a single key forward that looked like they should be in a premiership team. And in their defence, Alir was just unbelievable. Showed that he could, return to All-Australian teams in the next couple of years. Who else was there with him? I'm not sure.
I mean, we saw Zerk Thatcher play the best game of his career probably last week.
Yeah.
Didn't show up this week. Was comfortably beaten by Amadi, who hasn't beaten someone since the 9 goals against Adelaide. Up forward, like you said, they weren't missing anyone up forward either. I mean, Todd Marshall was out, but he looked shaky last week and probably didn't have a spot last week if Dixon was playing.
Yeah.
Ollie Lord was another one they were hopeful of, but apparently he's barely getting touches in the Sandville. So yeah, they'll take a good look at the list. I don't know if we'll see Boak again. I don't know if we'll see Dixon again. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Port come out next year after the prelim final disappointment again.
Yep.
But yeah.
The final thing I want to say on Port is that I think if they don't pick up a really important player in their forward line and in their back line, I could very well see them dropping out of the 8 next year.
100%. But yeah, testament to Ken Hinkley to getting them to a prelim again under so much pressure halfway through the year. But we'll move on to the next game, the thrilling prelim final. We wanted one of them, but the Brisbane versus Geelong game, what an absolute cracker of a game.
Last week I said we had the 2 best games of the season. Is it recency bias or was that the best game of the season, this Brisbane-Geelong game? I don't know how biased I am, but it was ridiculous to have a game that close in a prelim final context and with moments like that. The Brian Myers goal, 5 minutes before that, the Brian Myers assist, those 2 would have been contenders for goal of the year. Contentious, you don't want it. It's a bit of a touchy topic that goal and mark of the year don't extend to finals. But what the hell did we just see? It was crazy.
But I know we were messaging each other because it was Brad Close who whipped it all right to Messi, who just kept it in, whipped it in to Henry, who volleyed it home.
Oh my gosh! I need to find the message I sent you.
And then, like you said, it was Brian Myers to Jeremy Cameron in the qualifying final, the reaction, and then it was Jeremy Cameron to Brian Myers when he kicked that goal. They did the same reaction to the crowd. I couldn't believe.
Yeah, the hand on his head, and they showed like a 15-year-old in the crowd with the exact same reaction as Jeremy Cameron. How awesome is that? Yeah. Jeremy Cameron was just like a kid watching the footy with that Brian Myers goal.
And it was all of us behind the screen as well watching the game.
And with the Myers cross to the astute volley from Ollie Henry.
Yeah.
This is my analysis to Aiden in real time. It's KDB to Haaland. It's Dani Alves to Messi. It's Marcelo to Ronaldo. It's Trent to Salah. It's Grionel to Henry. It was truly a hilarious moment, given the meme of Brian Myers as Lionel Messi. But what a game. The Brisbane taking 2 speckies in the fourth quarter. Darcy Wilmot and Kai Lohmann. And Cam Rayner took a specky earlier too. It was the amount of quality that we saw in the game was ridiculous.
But I mean, this game was back and forth so much. I mean,
so open.
Brisbane, there wasn't a score for the first 18 or 19 minutes of the game. Brisbane got on top early, kicking 3-1. Then Geelong came out of nowhere to kick 7 goals in that second quarter. To be honest, it looked like they were going to run away with it at that point. And then Brisbane did what they did against GWS last week. They fought back from 25 points down. They got really stuck into the contest. The game looked like it went wide open, especially when Max Holmes went down.
Yep.
And it looks like Geelong lost a lot of run through the middle.
Yep. Can I tell you, the Brisbane forward half smalls, they're small forwards and half forward players, they terrified me as a Swans fan. They're the one part of that Brisbane team that really scares me matchup-wise. Before this season, they made a grand final. They already had electric sort of power and quality with Charlie Cameron and Zach Bailey up there. This season, we've seen Cam Rayner be better than both of them, really come into his own. And Kai Lohmann, that kid's going to be an absolute star.
We've only got one Harry Cunningham.
Yeah, and one Dane Rampy. Thank God we do have one Dane Rampy. He's cleared from the game. That's something we didn't touch on. But geez, I want you to tell us in the comments. Does Dane Rampy get a week if that's in the middle of the season? Did he get the grand final lenience? Maybe, but just on that, before we go off that, testament to Zach Butters though. Got absolutely hammered at full tilt in the neck by Rampy, bounced back up, started laughing. I'm very, very happy after that he was voted most courageous player in the competition. You can see why. You can see exactly why. Yeah. Kai Lohmann and those small forwards had massive moments, and they are a real mess to deal with as an opposition defence, especially when you have the quality key forwards like Joe Danaher and Eric Hipwood, who can really hit form and clunk marks when he's in good form. So if the Swans can quell Brisbane's forward line, we're going to talk a lot about that next video, but the Brisbane forward line was scary. Just another thing we haven't touched on is Oscar McInerney looked like he was in a world of pain when he dislocated his shoulder for the first time, and it looked really bad on TV. It looked like he wanted to throw up. Oh, yeah. Dry wrenching. Terrible. He went down the rooms. He probably knew at that point he wasn't going to play next week. Strapped up the shoulder, came back out, and he did have an impact, even hindered by his shoulder, and then obviously did his shoulder again and was subbed out. But what testament to him, though. Yeah, I know he's a man of faith, but there's some injuries I don't think even God can fix by grand final day. Yeah. Two dislocating a shoulder twice in one game. He's going to unfortunately have to watch from the sidelines, and we'll talk about next video what they do in terms of, or we can talk now. Do you reckon they bring in Darcy Fort as a ruckman, a guy who's played 2 games this year? Henry Smith, a more young, explosive guy who's played even less this year, I think? Or Joe Danaher, does he go into the ruck and they sacrifice a bit in their forward line? Well, I think that's what they can't afford to do. I think they can't afford to take Danaher out of the forward line, because then you're almost leaving Hipwood and Logan Morris, who's still growing into his body. They can't afford to leave just them in the forward line, so I think it will be someone that comes in, probably Darcy Fort, just with a bit more experience. And he did play the grand final last year. He did. Darcy Fort, so he isn't coming in with absolutely zero experience. He's been okay in the VFL from what I've heard on the podcast over the past couple of days since the game. Yeah. But I want to talk about Geelong as well. I think we need to give them props. We've sort of talked about some concerns with Port, and let me tell you something with Geelong. I am someone who I sort of resent how much Geelong are successful, how consistently successful they are, and so I like to always predict them to lose, but I'm very confident they'll be back next year competing for the premiership. This idea that sort of goes around the media sometimes, that they're aging and that they're falling off, that narrative's been going around since 2010, 2011 with Geelong. Yeah. It's simply not the case. It's a misconception. You just look around their team, Brian Myers, Max Holmes, Ollie Dempsey, Zach Guthrie, all these guys are young guys that are just going to be the next generation of Geelong
Smith
stars.
Coming in.
Absolutely.
I mean, I saw. I think it was 8 or 12 players that are here now that weren't in the 2022 grand final. Yeah. They're rebuilding on the run, and they're not. I mean, they had one off year last year, but I mean they've jumped right back. And yeah, like I said, I don't think either of us will be underestimating them in our ladder predictions for next year. Definitely, I could very, very well see them making the top 4 and competing just as hard again. 100%. Just a couple people we haven't mentioned whose performances go a little bit under the radar. Harris Andrews was awesome in that game. It's going to be a big impact next week. I thought Darcy Wilmer was really awesome as well. Chee stood up in a second final in a row. He just kicks goals when he needs to kick goals.
Just to add to those forward half movers that I talked about.
Exactly. He always brings the ball to ground. 3 goals again this week. Obviously, we saw Ollie Henry, what he did. It looked like he kicked the winner with 2 minutes to go. And I thought that was going to be the winner. And, I mean, Geelong still had a chance when Reece Stanley, if he didn't hit the post and he had slotted, they would have had 40 seconds to try and take the lead again. But yeah, and then Cam Rayner second half, which probably was the difference in the game, was 4 touches in the first half.
Quiet last week too.
Yeah, then 14 disposals and 2 goals with some important marks in the second half of that game.
Drilling it from 50
on his weak foot.
On his weak foot to seal the win. Unbelievable.
100%. Now, we're going to wrap up this video here because we're going to preview the grand final in the next video. But yeah, let us know what you think. Give us your predictions for that grand final. We want to know what you think. We're going to give you that in the next video in a couple of days just before the grand final.
See ya.